Hello, everyone. It's Joe Polish.
And this is Dan Sullivan.
And here we are, 10X Talk, ready to go to phase 2. The last episode, you're asking me a bunch of questions about...
Yeah, well, Genius Network, because, Joe, my whole life for the last 40 years has really been about entrepreneurs just creating something almost out of their imagination and out of their passion. We have many examples of that. Both you and I just attended the first conference that kicked off the program Abundance 360 with Peter Diamandis, who was introduced to me through your great networking skills. And literally, Peter created a fabulous book, which I consider one of the probably one or two most important books of my entire life, which is called Abundance, where he's just done a masterful job of summing up all the exponential technologies that are available in the world right now, the new kinds of exponential resources and opportunities are being created, and it's just making life incredibly better than it's ever existed on the planet. But a lot of people don't know this because the news media is strictly about bad news and how things are getting worse. But it was just a pleasure. I know, Joe, you and I were just spectators, really. I had done a lot of work with Peter, and you'd done a lot of work with Peter before the conference. But just to see him in an entirely new theater for him and an entirely new stage and process for him was just incredibly enjoyable. And, I was sitting there and I was just saying, this is the incredible reward you get for helping other individuals actually take their unique ability and put it in a form where in many ways the whole world can get it. And I know you share that pleasure and I share that pleasure. And I think what networking, genius networking, is really about, it's not what can the geniuses do for you, but actually what can you do for the geniuses, which in the act of contributing to them, you actually get a new capability yourself.
Right. And the beauty of what you just said there, too, is what we were able to witness and be so happy for Peter and all the people that were there because it was so incredibly valuable, is that is a byproduct of Genius Network and Strategic Coach.
Yes.
Peter admittedly, from the audience, even said that. The original idea came from me. The amount of people that you brought into that room, the structure, the format was totally through Peter working directly with you and your team and being in Strategic Coach. And so we talked about strategic byproducts at the very end, which is when I started my interview series, which was Genius Network was just an interview series, and then it became in-person meetings, and now it's the highest level group in the world for industry transformers and people that have intellectual property and unique packaging and focus on the area of marketing, and there's no other group like it. We have a billionaire that joined the group. And so basically, Peter's event all came out of Genius Network when he came to the very first 25K meeting, and the book Abundance was just getting ready to be launched. And through the network, it not only put together the people and the campaigns, it spent 9 weeks on New York Times, but this is what has become of it. And that is available to anyone that not only accesses a Genius Network or develops their own.
Yeah.
See, here's the cool thing too. I mean, you were totally helpful with Peter. There's no money being exchanged for that event other than Peter's a paying member of Strategic Coach and a paying member of Genius Network. But Peter is also doing these other events, and I'm a paying member of that. I became, a platinum partner of Singularity University, which is one of the first things I did with Peter. And now you have done and created something that I think is infinitely better than anything I've ever seen him done in any environment, which is the Abundance 360. And so this is really a mechanism on how to better your best, is to think of who are the people in your world, business and personally, that are the multipliers.
Yeah, I just want to talk about something because a lot of people really, really don't understand this principle. There's many, many ways, unique ways of getting paid in this world besides money. Actually, if you take money off the table as the way you're going to get paid, it actually opens the doors to some really unique ways of getting paid that most people don't even think about. And you mentioned it before that every one of the interviews that you do, which no money is really exchanged when you do these interviews with other people, they get paid because they get massive exposure through your contact list. But I think that one of the developing trends that I see in the world, and I think it goes right to the heart of Genius Network, Joe, is that what we're discovering in a world where every dollar you can make can be taxed and it can be observed by government, I think that there's a real movement on the part of entrepreneurs to create all sorts of value creation capabilities and networks and everything else, where in fact money doesn't get exchanged, but enormous value is being created by everyone who's involved.
Right, right. Yeah, and see, people that get that, they realize that there is this amazing gold mine of rewards that doesn't show up financially on the front end, but it will show up financially down the road if that's the goal. But it's your whole thing, the 5 ways you get paid, reward, utilize, appreciate, refer, enhance. And the psychological paycheck for me is more important than the financial paycheck, with the caveat being you got to have money.
Yes.
Money's critical. And once you have the mechanism of bringing in money, all money's not created equal. I always love referring to things as ELF. You can either have easy, lucrative, and fun opportunities, or you can have hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, or hard, annoying, and lucrative and frustrating. You can have ELF business, or you can have a half business. And there are ELF individuals and there are half individuals. And my relationship with you is ELF.
Yeah.
The relationship we have with Peter's relationship with you is, and me is the biggest ELF business Peter's probably ever been involved in.
The sort of image I'd like everybody to have in their mind is that when you go to a sports stadium or an arena and you look at the game, there's two experiences that people are having throughout the game. One of them is what's actually happening on the field or on the ice or on the floor. And then there's the scoreboard. And a lot of people have narrowed their life down to the only thing that they really think about is the scoreboard. But if you just studied scoreboards all your life, it wouldn't tell you a thing about the actual game that's actually taking place, that's getting everybody thrilled and where all the emotion is. And people who only think about money, they're scoreboard watchers. They don't know anything about the actual experience that's actually creating the score.
Right. Yep, there's so many lessons just in that. So here's one thing also, because you just mentioned the scoreboard thing, just reminds me of the type of people that I like dealing with and the type of clients I like working with. It's the people that are actually in the arena. The Theodore Roosevelt quote of the man in the arena.
Yes.
There's a lot to be said about working with and dealing with people that are willing to play the game. I saw this sign in front of a storage unit business when I was driving through Arizona. It was in Wickenburg. And there was a sign that said, "You don't build a great reputation by talking about what you're going to do." And I took a picture of that. I was like, that's great. I just really like people, look, talk about what you're going to do and do it.
Yes.
Or talk about what you're doing as you're doing it. But don't sit and talk about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then don't do it. Any moron can do that.
Well, and let your achievements do the bragging, it's along the same line. If you have the achievements, you don't have to say anything. The results are actually the biggest loudspeaker in the world.
Totally.
So talking about the arena and what's going on in the arena, let's talk about the arena of the actual forum right now that you've created, unique in the world, transformative. I do it 6 days a year. It's 4 years next month that I finally was able to arrange my strategic coach workshop schedule, which back then was really intense and it was year-long. I was able to free up a situation where I could actually come and spend 3 times a year. I could spend 2 days with the marvelous environment that you've actually created. But let's take it back now to the actual official beginning, because in our previous recording, we actually went over all the build up to get to the point where you actually launch this. So let's start right there today.
Okay, so going back probably, the conversation was about time we're doing this about 9 years ago. I had been running a platinum group, which was $1,000 a month to upwards of $17,000 a year, different versions of a coaching group where people that were in mostly service businesses, but a variety of different businesses would fly to Arizona, and they would be either in a 1-day or 2-day meeting with me several times a year. And we would have contests for people. They would engage, a thing we created called Better Your Best. And so I was, very successfully doing this and just having enormous results. And what I learned was you can teach people goal setting and stuff all day long, but the moment you start incentivizing them and giving them a vehicle to increase their intensity, is how I like to refer to it, people would just produce much better results. And so I did a little bit of consulting here and there. I would never heavily promote it. I still do to this day. I have a site set up for it called hirejoepolish.com and that sort of stuff. But I really do my best to talk people out of doing any sort of in-person consulting with me and joining one of the groups, because I think it's more bang for the buck. And plus, I'd rather do groups of people than one-on-one consulting. I just prefer it. So I had a client named Robin Robbins, and she is the top marketing expert in the world to the IT industry, people that are in the IT business for computers.
Robin is the master of retaining customers and clients.
Yes, she is awesome. She just is so smart and so talented and creates so much value for her clients.
It's kind of Reba McEntire. I mean, if people have a picture of who Robin is, it's kind of Reba McEntire.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Like Reba is her less wealthy sister.
Right. Robin is a bulldog. I mean, she is tenacious. She takes no shit from anybody, and she has really, really good stuff. I mean, she knows her stuff. And so she had hired me for a 2-hour process called an Opportunity Realization Roadmap, and ORR is how we would abbreviate it. And it would consist of me sending out some questions to someone, and they have any sort of opportunity that they want to launch or an existing business that they want to change or get out of. I mean, whatever someone wanted to help, needed marketing and strategy figured out. So I'd send them out a list of 25 questions, and it would require them to do some pretty serious thinking. And then they would get on the phone with me for a couple of hours, and I would talk to them for a couple of hours. And I was charging, $6,000 for that. Now I charge $25,000 for half a day to do that stuff. But basically, she had hired me. And at the end of 2 hours, she said, Joe, why don't you create a platinum group for information marketers? And information marketers would be people that are in book authors, speakers, coaches, people that sell kits, online programs, product launches, things like that. Because that's what she was. She would do seminars and she would sell courses and training and that sort of thing. And she made that comment to me, and she's like, why don't you create a platinum group for info marketers? And I said, well, it's not like I haven't thought about that, but like anything else, you got to put it together. It takes time. You got to market it. I go, I've thought about it. I just haven't done it. However, on the last episode, Dan, remember I mentioned I listen to what people say?
Yes.
I said to her, I go, however, though, if I ever did do it, what would you suggest I charge for it? And she's like, well, I just paid you $6,000 for 2 hours and I got a ton of value out of this. I would, pay you $25,000 a year if you started a program like that. And so I said, okay, so what you're saying is you would pay me $25,000 a year if I did it. And she goes, absolutely. And I would refer other people to the group. And so I said, oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. And let me think about that. And if I ever decide to do it, I'll let you know. And so we hung up the call, and I kind of sat there for a couple of minutes. I thought, this is interesting. I really like doing brainstorm sessions, and I would always do them at my office. And I would bring down the original people that I had learned marketing from, John Carlton and Gary Halbert. And I would always have lunch with a guy named Dan Kennedy when he used to live in Phoenix. And, Dan's a curmudgeonist, very smart marketer. I used to have lunch with Dan almost weekly when he was in town for 2 years straight. And so I would always have these brainstorm sessions at my office, but they would only happen, whenever I decided to pull it together, but they would be so great. And we would come together and people would just talk, and they'd talk about stuff that they weren't talking about with anyone else. And they would share what they're doing in their own worlds. And it would be really useful for everyone else that was there, but there was no structure to it. There was no business built around it. But I thought about it for about a month. And then I called up Robin and I said, I think I'm going to start that program that you said do a platinum for, information marketers, and I'll call it the Genius Network Mastermind. And she's like, perfect. So she FedExed me a check the next day. So I get her check and I call up several other people and I basically say, Robin joined this thing. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. And these were all people that I would call them for advice half the time, which is really funny. But I had created so much value for them, and they knew how useful coming and meeting with me was, especially because I would bring in all these other geniuses, because I'm a curator of really smart people.
Yes.
And so everyone I talked to, they're like, yeah, I'll join. And I started it. And what's funny is I had everyone pay in the beginning with checks so that I could take a copy of their check, photocopy it. We would put a black marker through the account number and their signature and stuff, and we would literally reproduce it. And so we sent out a letter showing other people that these other smart, well-known people were actually cutting me a check. So they didn't think anyone was getting comped into this group, because I made it real clear. Everyone pays. There's no guests. The only time we ever have a guest is if they're a speaker or if they work for me or if I have equity in their company. Beyond that, everyone pays.
Joe, I just want to say something here, because over the last 6 months, you've brought up the subject. What I want to really do now is create 100,000, 100K group. And I just want to broadcast right here for the world that when the day that you announce that, Babs and I are the first people to sign up for it.
I love you, Dad. You're awesome.
And I want to bring up a subject here because we've had, Joe, you and I have talked about this over the years, that the winners in the world consider every check they write an investment, and the losers of the world think every check they write is a cost.
Right.
Okay. And paying $100,000 to you, personally, for myself, I don't see anything about that a cost. I see it just pure investment. And, I'll tell everybody here, I came to your first group. You said, this is how it works. You've paid me $25,000. If in the first year you don't get an idea that at least takes that investment 10 times, then I'm not going to let you back for the second year because you're a real dummy and I don't want to fill up my room with dummies. And I know after the first half hour, and we have this on record, it's on video record, I walked up to the front of the room, and I'll tell you, I told Joe, I said, I just got my $250,000 back, and that would be just the beginning. And that single idea that I got just from you talking about the investment and the 10 times return launched an entirely new program for me. And as near as I can figure right now, the return after the third year is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $12, $13 million. So this is part of entrepreneurism, is that the entrepreneur never looks at their outlays as costs, only as investments. We could do a whole session on that, because people are saying, geez, who would pay $25,000 that? Well, I said people who look at the world as costs would never pay it, but people who look at the world as an investment would pay $25,000.
Yes, exactly. I think I've always had that mindset, because if you treat knowledge or you treat strategic byproducts, you create really elegant solutions and elegant ideas and game-changing individuals and strategy as a commodity. I mean, it's the Henry Ford thing. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And it's a real scarcity mindset to be. Real players don't value information by the pound. They value it by the value of the information applied and what it does for their thinking, what it does for their life. And, I already know the individuals that are in 25K, the way that I structure it, unless you really don't have your act together, there's no way that you're not going to parlay the $25,000 investment into many, many multiples.
Oh, yeah.
One of our very first people that joined, Dean Graziosi, he was doing between 12 to 20 million a year in revenue on average the first year he joined. And last year, his company did right under 200 million in sales. And Dean will be one of the first ones to tell you, most of the strategies and the relationships that have allowed him to build up that company came out of being in 25K. And I've got numerous videos of him talking about that. And it's not just the money that has improved with Dean, the quality of his services, the way he's presented himself, the success stories of his clients. I mean, it's exponentially.
Well, his whole service attitude and everything, the constant expansion of value creation around what in that kind of world would be seen just as a transaction. And I think over the years that what Dean has produced, that it's not a transaction, it's a transformation. And transformation comes from massive amounts of extra value. Transactions are transactions, but what's around the transaction that would make it into a transformation?
Right.
Oh, and I want to say something right here, since we're making promises on air here is I know Dean wants to be number one in the new group, and you'd have to promise here, right, Joe, that we get 24 hours advance notice before Dean.
Actually, I would love that because I will rub it in his face all the time.
Yeah, and tell him it's just a matter of love, Dean. It's just a matter of love. The people I love most get the first crack to pay me $100,000.
Hey, look, I'll go on record and say that I think you're cooler than Dean anyway, so that's not even a question. Yeah. That'll be great too. I mean, he's very competitive. That's the funny thing about Dean. And that's what the thing is with entrepreneurs too. I mean, we have very competitive people in 25K, but they're not competitive in terms of they're not sharing. It's one of the most chummy, sharing, friendship-oriented groups where the vast majority of people there are applauding everyone's success. They're happy to see it happen. It's just a very unique group. And I think a lot of that comes from how I run it, how I select people to be in the group, and the type of people that we attract to it. And so for people that are listening to this, the takeaways are, there's many, but the things that I will point out is, for one, always continually focus on how you can continue to add value. With the 100K group as an example, I've had 4 people tell me that as soon as I start a 100K group, they will join. And it's not because they just want to stroke a check for $100,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. And so in order for me to do that, I don't want a 1 year where I get a bunch of people to pay $100,000 and then they don't want to renew. I mean, I am very focused on, in order to have someone invest $100,000 into, an educational format, into a platform, it really needs to bring a return, not just money, but of their time, because these are very successful people that are doing this. So I'm very clear about, some people just want to figure out how much money they can sell something for, but it doesn't take a genius to have a great marketing campaign and get people to pay money. I mean, the real success is the longevity of the clientele.
I always say to my salespeople and everything in Strategic Coach, I says, what we are selling is a lifetime relationship here. So don't treat it like a transaction. You don't talk to people that you're offering the possibility of a lifetime relationship the same way you're doing a one-off sale. And so you got to really appreciate, but you got to be committed to that. So Joe, if you had to pick 3 things that you've learned most since you started that very first meeting that Robin was a part of, and I think Dean was a part of, what have really emerged, and almost in a surprising way for you, what has emerged as the 3 strongest attractors to the Genius Network now that you've had, a whole number of years? What was the start year, if you can remember the start year?
2000 and, was it 2005 or 2006,
Yeah, so you're almost pushing a decade. If I said you could only pick 3 things that have been the biggest major forces that have made Genius Network so powerful, what would number 1 be?
I've actually asked 25K members what they get out of it. So there's different things for different people. From my perspective, it's definitely the community. It's the camaraderie, the relationships, the networking, the individuals, the sounding boards that the group represents. It's being able to go to a place in their world. These ideas and their visions will get size from the people that work for them sometimes, or their family members will think they're crazy, and they come to Genius Network and they're celebrated and they're applauded for their big visions and for their industry transformative methods and products and services and stuff. So that's one thing, just the community. The second is that I have learned, and I do my best to convey this, is that one elegant idea is worth more than 1,000 semi-good ideas. And that really successful people, they like ideas, they love ideas, or they hate ideas because they got too many of them in their brain. Some people's brains manufacture continuously ideas. And the focus on the more successful and the smarter and talented and skilled somebody is, the less they need ideas. What they want is elegant ideas. And I mean, you've learned this too, and you do a great job at Strategic Coach helping people filter through all of the random thoughts going through their head, is that the more successful they are, the less props they need.
Yes.
They need less stuff. And so, we're not doing monthly conference calls. We're not sending out a ton of stuff. I'll send out a red box several times a year. We have a red box where in that red box will contain a CD or a strategy or something that we feel will have at least $250,000 of value. So I'm very focused on the 10 times return. And so that would be the other thing, is just the emphasis on thinking about $250,000 qualifiers that will multiply.
Yeah.
In the ways that we get there, the mechanisms that we get there are we do 3-person hot seats where people focus on problems, challenges, and opportunities. And then as a group, we have all these smart people that they will get together with and they'll solve their problems on the spot or come up with a strategy to reach their opportunities. That's big. And then, of course, one of my greatest innovations was the 10-minute talk format.
Yeah. Can we talk about that? Because I'm just amazed at the power of that one little simple structure. You know, I'm in the business of looking for things that really work fast for entrepreneurs because, you know, historically we've had about 16,000 entrepreneurs who either have attended or are still active in Strategic Coach. And on the ADD spectrum, the attention deficit disorder structure, and this is pretty well consistent with entrepreneurs, I would say 60% of them are somewhere on the spectrum. And if it doesn't happen fast, if they don't get it right away and it's not actionable, they're not going to buy it. And so talk about the insight that led up to that. You know, I agree with the community. And the big thing going back to the previous recording where we talked about the great thing about when people are in that room, they don't tell lies, they don't cover up, they don't hide their mistakes. It's all out in the open. And I think that's why the community is so united because you don't have to put on an act in there. But the second thing was this one simple structure that you've created, which I find just amazing. So talk a little bit about it. I know it to a certain extent, one of the ideas came from TED.
Yes. And see, I watch a lot of TED Talks. I mean, I've attended a boatload of events and seminars. I've read over 1,000 books. I'm a big consumer of getting an edge, how to do something better. I want to learn tactics. I want to learn strategies. I want to learn, other people's stupid human tricks. And I want to help people share their stupid human tricks that aren't really stupid. Actually, they're brilliant human tricks with other people quickly in a way that someone could use it. And I love TED, by the way. I mean, I think there's a lot of really incredible TED Talks, and there's some that might be interesting, but how useful are they? And so TED has this tagline, which is ideas worth spreading. And so I started thinking a lot about, I'm charging a lot more than what it costs to go to TED. I have people coming on a continuity basis. They're developing deep relationships with each other. How are we going to always have something that's new, better, and different, to use words from you, that continually gives people confidence and clarity and allows them to just multiply? And so I started thinking, all right, well, since I have this $25,000 a year program, what if I could have people share in 10 minutes a best practice or strategy that has been worth at least $250,000 or more to them in their business and do it in 10 minutes so that by the time they're done, the people in the audience get it and they actually can take steps and do it. They can use it, where every minute would be worth $25,000. And so part of it was like creating a value of, I charge $25,000 for the year. What if I could have a 10-minute talk during one of the 2-day events where that alone, every event they come to, they're going to walk out of there with at least one $250,000 elegant idea or solution, or maybe several. How useful would that be? I mean, who would not want to be in that program? So, it's my constant desire to blow people away and deliver an experience. I interviewed Nathaniel Brandon, who's the father of self-esteem, psychologist, many years ago. He's a friend of mine. Several years ago, I interviewed him, and he made this statement. He said, when someone goes to therapy, they're not going for an explanation. They want a therapist that's going to sit there and explain to them a psychological issue. He's like, when someone goes for help, they're not going for an explanation. They're going for an experience. And I always love that line because, people aren't coming to this seminar to be entertained. I mean, these are people that run seminars. These are people that write New York Times best-selling books. These are people that run multi-million-dollar businesses. I mean, they don't need an explanation. They need an experience. And so I wanted to deliver people that sort of thing. So I started thinking, how about ideas worth using? And I tested it out, and I created a whole process where people will spend more time filling out in clarifying their subject matter and their content in a one-page form, and then they are prepared to deliver a 10-minute talk. And so we started testing this out at a couple of meetings, and this was back in the beginning of 2012. And lo and behold, the people in the audience, including you, loved it. I mean, we had some people get up and do some 10-minute talks. And so then I created our very first, we were doing annual events. You know, I had Richard Branson come, Bill Phillips. You would speak at all of them. You always speak at all of them because you're awesome. And I decided to do one in New York where I would allow people that weren't in 25K to actually come to the annual event. It's the only event that I do once a year where people that aren't official 25K members that pay $25,000 a year can actually come to the event, and I charge $10,000 for it. And during that event, we had 36 or 38 people at the 2012 event give 10-minute talks. And then in 2013, we did it again. And the 2013 event, we actually sold out. We had 206 people.
You know what I noticed is that because you had prepared people for the 2012 experience to get good at this 10-minute talk thing, it's a lot easier to give a half-hour presentation than it is to give a 10-minute presentation. I mean, it's really, really interesting, the discipline. And you can't talk about yourself in a 10-minute talk. You can only talk about the audience, and that's a great discipline for anyone who wants to market. Don't talk about yourself. Nobody cares. But I just noticed such a quantum leap in the quality of the 10-minute talks 1 year later, because you're actually creating this brand new form in the world for people to organize themselves and basically get their act together in a remarkably short period of time and get it across in a very powerful way. And, you know, I can't imagine anyone, I don't care whether you give a 10-minute talk or not, if you're just sitting there for 2 days and you're getting the benefit of these, each of them, which is a big energy charger, energy booster, that your whole communications style wouldn't be immensely improved just by being in the audience and listening to that.
Oh, and see, that's one thing that people in 25K have told me. We've now had people that filled out a 10-minute talk form that had no intention whatsoever of doing a 10-minute talk. But I'm like, well, we want you to fill this out because think of any best practice or strategy. So for one, it causes people to think about what they are doing or have done in their business that has been worth at least $250,000. So it's a real heavy emphasis on what is working. How are you strategic? And some of these have to do with like money-making strategies. Others have to do with health. Others have to do with rituals. Others have to do with the way they do relationships. Some of them have even gone into things like meditation and how they spend time with their families. We've had people give talks on how they've gotten injured and were forced to have to figure out how to make work without them working.
Yes.
How to make their business work and how that ended up making their companies even more successful. So there's all kinds of incredibly useful things that come out of it. And the more that we do this, the more we realize, wow. And so the people that have been doing these 10-minute talks, I've had some that have turned into articles, into knowledge products, into brand new seminars, and several of them right now, meaning 25K members, are actually writing books that first started as doing my 10-minute talk form.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is great to see the seeds that are growing into all of these different strategic byproducts. And so now when I do 25K meetings, you know, I mean, the 2012 meeting, we had all kinds of well-known business people. We had Arianna Huffington and Steve Forbes and Tim Ferriss and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. And it goes on and on and on. The one this year, we're moving it to Newport Beach in 2014. And that's going to be August 14th and 15th at an incredible, beautiful resort.
Pelican Hill, rated one of the top luxury resorts in the world.
Exactly. So 25K is not just speakers. I mean, it is incredible speakers, incredibly honed content, incredible networking opportunities, great sounding boards. Yeah, it's awesome.
One of the things that I just observed last year, because, you know, there's a real spectrum, and I created a scoring system for rating all the speakers, which I gave back to Eunice on your team. And I said, you know, you should actually use this as a basis for developing your own scoring system so that people can actually qualify for the main platform. But one of the things that I just noticed is that 10 minutes isn't the same amount of time depending on the speaker, and that if the speaker spends 10 minutes talking about themselves, it's the longest 10 minutes in the world.
Yeah.
And if they spend 10 minutes talking about the audience, it's the shortest 10 minutes in the world.
Right. Very true. And it really forces people to become much more powerful communicators. What's even more funny, you're absolutely right when you say it's harder to do a 10-minute talk than it is a 30-minute talk. And we have people that are incredibly bright, but they're not speakers. I mean, they don't go out and give presentations, but they're kind of like, I've never done a 10-minute talk before, so I'll give it a shot because they think it's only 10 minutes. But in reality, they have to think about it. And so we have now taken people that have incredible knowledge that are never going to write a book. They're not going to do a seminar. That's not their thing. And they are actually sharing in a logical format how they can do that.
I asked you for 3 points. So you gave the community, you gave the 10-minute talk, and probably the way to round out this particular presentation is just to talk about the third thing you've gotten. One thing, just possibly a trigger for you, is that I've just noticed what's happened to you over the last 8 or 9 years as someone who can handle a huge room with a great sense of style and ease. And I don't know if that's your third point, but I certainly see it.
Well, I'd say the networking and certainly the way that people do business there is one of the key points. What I would say, people want elegant ideas, they want a great community, and they want to meet incredible people. I mean, there are people that like meeting very successful entrepreneurs. And I also know, so you take new things. When we first started talking about this on the previous episode, like what are the things that are coming down the pike that are going to be really important? Well, I'd say a lot of things that are being discussed with Peter as an example. Crowdfunding, incentivized competitions are huge. Automation, things like text messaging and doing product launches and using video online, using technology for your messaging and doing it in an automated way and reaching people on all of their communication devices, not just computer, not just email, but mobile devices, text messaging. Those are the things that I think are going to be the big game changers, 3D printing and manufacturing, how that's going to change everything. And so having continual conversations about the latest and greatest, newest technology, because you can get really overwhelmed by all of the new gadgets out there. But when you come to 25K and you see somebody that is saying, okay, there's 1,000 different softwares and there's all kinds of different technologies, but here's one that I'm using that's added, $1 million to my business in the last 3 months. People want to hear that stuff. So the very strategic, elegant ideas, I think, are just so key.
Yeah.
And you can't get that from people can go on Netflix and for $7.95 a month, they can access TED Talks, incredible documentaries, all kinds of stuff in a very organized format, just providing people with content online. You don't have to pay anything. I mean, you can listen to 10xtalk.com right now and you're getting incredible, useful business stuff. I love marketing. There's all kinds of useful stuff that's out there. Coming to a meeting is where players come to get better and better themselves.
There's a great value, and the value is getting greater from online content. But I have to tell you, it'll never replace the actual being in the presence of other people. Humans communicate on about 20 more dimensions when they're together than would ever be possible online.
Exactly.
The right people. I've met some people where I would prefer the online experience, but they're, I can name a lot of people I wish my only experience was online where I can click after 5 seconds, but
Yes, let me say this too, Dan, because I want to make sure I got this in my head, is you were talking earlier about people that look at something as a cost versus an investment. One of the things, I'll recommend Strategic Coach to so many people. I've done that for years. And they'll be like, well, how am I going to make the time? How am I going to go to 25K? How am I going to go to, I'm super busy. I'm already doing a bunch of stuff. And I'll say, well, it's either going to take you time or it's going to make you time. It's going to multiply you. It's going to produce results. It's either going to cost you money or it's going to make you money. And going to Strategic Coach, going to 25K doesn't take any extra time. Are you going to have to block out days of the year? Absolutely. Yes, you're going to have to fly. You're going to have to sit in a room. You're going to have to engage with other people. Now, if you're completely a disengaged human being, you shouldn't engage in anything because what's the point? But if you've got electricity running through you and you want to power yourself in a much greater level and multiply yourself, everyone that I've referred to Strategic Coach that actually goes to Strategic Coach, it doesn't take them extra time. What they learn there on how to organize their life, organize their business, think about things, eliminate shit they shouldn't be doing, go to a much greater level of performance and productivity while taking time off, it frees them. These things don't cost people money. They give people freedom. They make people money. But that's a mindset, because half of what someone gets out of these sort of investments of time and money is half of what we provide and the other half of who they show up. And if you're the right person, this will make sense to you. And the right people will hear this and they'll like, yeah, strategic coach is right for me. 25K is right for me. I mean, I'm really clear just from hearing Joe and Dan talk about it on this level that I definitely can leverage that. And there's other people that are like, what are they talking about?
I tell entrepreneurs, and they say 25K, and I said, you've blown more money on really bad hires. You've hired someone, then you had to fire them, and you're spending all sorts of money on things which actually do turn out to be incredible costs because they were never an investment in the first place. But,
I have one person, I won't say his name to not embarrass him, but several years ago, he was contemplating, he wanted to buy like a $100,000 sports car, and he ended up buying the sports car, and 2 years later finally joined 25K, and after the first meeting, he's like, I'm such an idiot. I put more emphasis on buying the $100,000 sports car than paying 25 grand because I felt that was a bigger investment, and I could have bought 10 of these sports cars if I would have done it. I'm like, oh, there you go. I mean, it's easier for some people to spend 100 grand on a freaking Porsche than it is to 25,000 or whatever on strategic coach that could make them millionaires and give them 100 free days a year. So
So there's people who pay $100,000 a year to belong to a golf club where they hang out with people who are very, very incredibly boring. And the big thing is what's going to multiply you as an individual, what's going to multiply your future. And really great investments are multiplier investments. I don't live in a world of costs at all. I live in a world of investments. Not all of them are good investments, just like buying stocks. But nobody would consider investing in the stock market a cost. It's an investment. They just have some bad experiences, and we all do. And that's the world we're living in. But the biggest investments that you can possibly make is in your increased clarity, confidence, and capability about who you are in a world of almost unlimited opportunities if you got the right mindset and you have the right approach and you have the right networks. And Genius Network is just the best network you could possibly use to multiply yourself in the future.
Thank you, Dan. And I really appreciate you obviously facilitating a conversation which allows me to talk about the group that I love and that you're a part of it. And so the last thing I would really say to everyone is our friend JR has this great line, for those that get it, no explanation is needed. For those that don't, no explanation will do. And there are people out there that just get it. And if you're one of those people that get it, I mean, great, because the getting it is what you want. We've talked on previous episodes where you say entrepreneurs make it up and then they make it real. And in order to take your ideas and turn them into reality, I mean, you need strategy. You need direction, confidence, and capability. You want to surround yourself with people that are going to champion and tell you, yeah, go for it. This is awesome. This is incredible. Tweak it here, tweak it there. Little hinges swing big doors. And you also want people to say, you're completely going down an idiotic path. I mean, you might want to rethink this before you self-implode. Because I will tell you, it's not about what it costs to go to Strategic Coach or Genius Network. People will piss away and lose far more money by not accessing what we have available to them than what it costs to even be in it. And not just in money, but in time. I mean, I know people that would have saved their businesses had they been in Strategic Coach, that have not blown hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Or their marriages, or their families, or their health.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I will say that Genius Network, not just mine, but your Genius Network and having that community, if you're an individual listening to this and you're a brand new startup, you wouldn't even qualify to come to Genius Network or to go to a Strategic Coach, do the same thing that I think me and you did. I mean, we learned from the experiences of others. Me and you have collectively developed our own schools when we didn't have schools that we could even go to. We've read a lot of books. We are in the arena. And if you're going to be in the arena, I tell people that are in the coaching business, if you're going to go out and coach other entrepreneurs and business owners, but you're not in a group yourself, to me, it's almost kind of like hypocritical. There's almost like an arrogance about it. Like, I'm so smart, I'm too cool for school. And I'll tell people that, look, if you're in the coaching business and you're successful at what you do, if you're in the how-to business, go to Strategic Coach, go to 25K. I mean, why wouldn't you want to use that? I mean, name a professional athlete that's at the top of their game that does not have a coach, that does not have someone or a group of people that I would call their genius network, that they can have everything too. So I just really believe in the whole concept. It's worked for me and it works for other people, and that's why we're talking about it. So thank you. And that's all I have to say. That's my rambling for today.
I just want to thank you because I know most of the story, but I've got an incredibly bigger overview of how this whole thing's been created since you first started doing the interviews in 1995. So this is fabulous for me, and it helps me kind of tell other people about what you do, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. And it is collaboration. And so my whole thing is keep collaborating with people that you're aligned with, and you will both grow and multiply. And that's just the way the world works. So thank you, Dan. And for all our listeners, please give us your comments at 10xtalk.com. Share this with everyone you know that would be a right fit. And thank you for listening, and I hope you found it useful. So thanks, Dan.
Okay, bye.